Let's hear from an expert in this area, a managing partner at PCS Advisers and a healthcare benefits consulting firm based in Northern California. Paul Siegert joins me now to talk about this. He's played an integral role in changing the way that business manage their second largest expense, and unwilling to accept the unsustainable renewal increases for employee health care. Well, he set out to find a better way. He joins us right now. Paul Siegert, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing great today. How are you, Laura?
I'm great. I'm glad that you're here. Can you help us understand a little bit about the interplay between insurance and coronavirus? We know about there being, of course, this FDA approval for Pfizer. People have become quite accustomed over the past year or more about how employers are oftentimes, paying the price literally for COVID testing or perhaps even treatment. And insurance, of course, is really big business here in the U.S. But I have a sense it's about to come to an end. What's the latest?
Well, most insurers, a really high percentage, about what covered maybe 88% of us, or the vast majority, if you had COVID and were hospitalized earlier on in the pandemic, they would waive your out-of-pocket costs. So you were not in a position where you had to come up with your deductible or your max out-of-pocket, which for many people could be, a max out-of-pocket could be as high as $7,000. So they were covering that, and there's multiple reasons why they would have done that. One of those is the fact that they have to spend, insurers, 85 cents for every dollar they take in premium they have to spend on a claim, or they have to rebate it at the end of the year. And claims were down very significantly because all of us were, there were all these stay-at-home orders, so people weren't getting non-essential care. So they took the opportunity to spend some of that by covering people's out-of-pocket costs. And, of course, there weren't vaccines at the time that were in use, and as those have become more and more available, and now very widely available, we're seeing most of those temporary programs are going away.
And so these temporary programs, first of all, is that within the rights of the insurance company to do so? It was always the discretion, per se, of the insurance companies to even waive those out-of-pocket costs, or was it something that the government mandated?
It's a good question. They did this in a voluntary way, kind of like, the movie industry said, we'll come up with our own rating system rather than get forced into one that we don't like. So for the most part, the industry beat the federal government to the punch there by saying, hey, we will waive your out-of-pocket costs, which then gave them the ability to retract that at a time that made sense for the industry. So it was, for the most part, all voluntary on the part of the insurers. And now that they've seen their normal claims costs come back because people are able to get all the various services that they typically would receive in a given year, they've begun to pull those things back. Many of them already have. I think we're at 72% of them have expired, and more will by October.
Now, is this because the vaccines are readily available now? So is it essentially a penalty? Because some people have breakthrough cases, right? And so the idea that not having the vaccine and medical expenses related to COVID, although we know the vaccine means that you're not going to have nearly as a serious of case as others who are not vaccinated. But is this an idea of, does that mean generally, if you have been vaccinated, then the cost that you would incur in terms of your medical expenses, the insurers could still provide, versus if you have not been vaccinated, they could make a different choice?
We're not seeing it break out along those lines. It's pretty much all or nothing. So for those that have stopped these programs, it's for all. So if you had a breakthrough case and you were hospitalized as a result, which of course is a very, very small number of cases like that. But were that to happen, unfortunately, you would now be subject, most likely, depending on your insurer and whether they've sunset the policy or not, you would be subject to your deductible and your max out-of-pocket and co-insurance and other share of cost.
So let's talk about what those numbers mean, because I know that there was this survey, the KFF analysis, and they did 2 of the largest insurers in each state and in Washington, D.C., and they found that, 72% had already stopped waiving the cost-sharing requirement. Is that right, as of this month alone?
That's right, and the majority of the remainder will over the next couple of months. There may be some that keep it open if the if the emergency status of the pandemic is extended, that's expected to, or at least if it is unchanged, that will expire in October, and likely any remaining allowances or programs like this will go away with that emergency status.
And so, I mean, in the first half of this year, there are about a third of employers who are offering these health benefits, and now that seems to have changed. And so the deductible, what is it normally? I mean, the typical deductible in an employer health plan is about what?
Well, I saw that same study, and looking at lots of health plans on a daily basis, I felt like it was really pretty low. An average deductible, what I like to say is, what's the average out-of-pocket risk that a person faces? Because there's so many different ways you can see that happen. You have a deductible, you have co-insurance until you hit your max out-of-pocket. You may be on a plan with various co-pays for different services. And that average American right now is facing $5,000 of out-of-pocket risk in their plan. And so it's not a small number. I mean, that's a pretty big number for most people to come up with. And that's the risk that they're facing now.
So is this, I mean, I know there's a lot of this happens behind closed doors, obviously, but talk to me a little bit about the insurance industry, though, in terms of what is the calculus being made in terms of this decision? What was the decision initially in order to waive this versus now? It seems like in some respects waiving it was probably a PR move, and now saying forget about it is reactive to the fact that there is a vaccine. So is there more to the story?
I think there is a little bit more to the story. Insurers are very good at this. It's a very successful for-profit business here, and many of them were posted. There's only a handful of big national insurers left: the Blues, United, Cigna, Aetna, Humana, and they were all posting record profits coming off of the year where claims were down, this past year, where claims were down 70%. We saw many of them posting $6.6 billion, same quarter over last year where they had 3.3. And so they were in a position where they had the funds. They were going to have to rebate them or spend them by waiving these deductibles or giving people premium credits or premium holidays or different things that they can do. But they were going to have to spend the money anyway, so it made good sense from a PR standpoint, to your point, to do this. And then I think now, when we fast forward to today and we're watching all of these policies expire, it has a lot to do with the fact that the vaccines are here and they don't have the need from the medical loss ratio rules standpoint to kind of get rid of cash. So they're not going to. And the vaccine gives them cover to say, hey, you can get vaccinated if you want. So we're going to go ahead and sunset these rules. But I think it ties in more so to the math related to the medical loss ratio rules that are part of the Affordable Care Act that they are subject to.
So the hospitalization is a part of it. What about, say, COVID testing? Or, I mean, a lot of the companies that are even having the vaccine mandates are making rules essentially of, well, fine, get vaccinated. Otherwise, you have to be subjected to sometimes biweekly, sometimes weekly, sometimes twice weekly testing. And so I'm wondering if is an out-of-pocket expense also something like a COVID test?
I don't think so. We'll continue to see those covered. They're going to want to encourage that. And if they're requiring the testing, they'll continue to cover that. So we haven't seen any real change there, and I don't expect that we will.
So this is really about them waiving out-of-pocket costs and now not waiving out-of-pocket costs for coronavirus hospitalizations in particular.
Exactly, which is not a small number. In June, July of this year, the system spent $2.3 million on hospitalizations, COVID hospitalizations for unvaccinated people.
2 million?
2.3 billion with a B.
Oh, I was going to say, that's not a very high number, Paul, for in the insurance world. I mean, for maybe you and I and the rest of normal people, but insurance would probably be like, wow, we did great, 2 million. That's wonderful. Raise everything.
2.3 billion isn't that big to these guys, but it's big.
Okay, billion with a B. Now we're talking sort of like rubbing of the hands together insurance moment that it goes, wait a second, we got to stop this. Okay, now that makes more sense. Billion, okay. My goodness. Well, Paul, we'll have to follow this story and see where it goes because it's interesting to think about just how we are generally talking about the carrot and the stick and the incentives and what's going on, and whether corporate America is going to do certain mandates versus the government. When the insurance company starts to sort of quietly behind the scenes make decisions that are going to hit people right in the wallet, I wonder if that will lead to change. That's going to be an interesting story to follow. Paul Seeger, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Have a great day.
You too.